3 umpires. 1 superstar. And a moment that nobody in that stadium, nobody watching at home, could have possibly predicted. It started as a normal plate appearance. Another chapter in the most extraordinary individual streak baseball had witnessed in years. 44 consecutive plate appearances reaching base. A number that had already rewritten the conversation around the greatest player alive. And then, everything stopped. Not because of a home run. Not because of a stolen base. Not because of anything Shohei Ohtani did with a bat or his legs or his impossible combination of athletic gifts. Everything stopped because 3 umpires walked toward him. Surrounded him. And asked him to remove his jacket. Right there. On the field. In front of thousands of fans inside the stadium and millions watching from home. What happened in those next few minutes sent shockwaves through the dugouts, ignited a fury in the Rangers manager that he could not contain, triggered an explosive confrontation when Muncy screamed at the home plate umpire, and exposed a wrong call so significant that it is still being talked about today. This is the full story. Every detail. Every reaction. Every consequence. And when you hear all of it together, you will understand why this was not just a baseball moment. This was the moment that revealed exactly how much pressure surrounds one man when he carries an entire sport on his shoulders. Stay with us. Before we get to the confrontation, before we get to the umpires and the jacket and the fury, you need to feel the weight of what was happening in that stadium leading up to the 5th inning. 44 consecutive plate appearances reaching base. That number had become its own living, breathing presence at every game. It was in the crowd before the first pitch. It was in the press box where journalists had already prepared 2 versions of their story, one for if the streak continued, one for if it ended. It was in the opposing dugout where managers and pitching coaches had spent hours, sometimes days, preparing specifically for the challenge of being the ones who finally stopped it. Every time Ohtani stepped into the batter's box during this stretch, the atmosphere shifted. The crowd leaned forward collectively. The noise changed texture. Even people who had been casually watching suddenly put down their phones and paid attention. Because everyone understood they might be watching history being made. Or history being ended. And either way, it was unmissable. That is the environment inside which the 5th inning arrived. That is the pressure that had been building, plate appearance by plate appearance, game by game, week by week. And it is inside that pressure, that enormous, stadium-filling, nationally televised pressure, that 3 umpires made a decision that nobody saw coming. It happened quickly. These things always do. One moment everything is following the expected rhythm of a baseball game, the setup, the signs, the pitch, and then suddenly the rhythm breaks and something completely unexpected is unfolding in real time. The umpires moved toward Ohtani with purpose. This was not a casual walk. This was not a routine check. Anyone watching could see immediately that something specific had triggered this. Something one of them had noticed. Something that required not 1, not 2, but 3 officials to address simultaneously. They surrounded him. That word matters, surrounded. Not approached. Not gestured toward. Surrounded. As in, positioned themselves around him in a way that communicated the seriousness of what was about to happen. And then came the request that sent an audible ripple through the crowd. Remove the jacket. In baseball, a body check of this nature carries enormous weight. It is not done casually. It is not done on a whim or a suspicion or a minor concern. Umpires who initiate a physical inspection of a player are making a statement. They are saying, we have reason to believe something is happening here that should not be happening. We have reason to believe the integrity of this at-bat, this game, this competition may be compromised. For it to happen to Shohei Ohtani, the most scrutinized, most celebrated, most carefully watched player in the sport, made the moment almost surreal. The stadium went from noise to a different kind of noise. Not silence exactly. But that particular brand of collective shock where thousands of people make sound without quite knowing what they are reacting to yet. Ohtani complied. Calmly. With that characteristic composure that never seems to crack regardless of the circumstances surrounding him. He removed the jacket. The inspection proceeded. And in the Rangers' dugout, something very different was happening. There is a code in professional baseball around what managers will and will not accept happening on a field. They will argue calls. They will protect their players. They will push back against officiating decisions they believe are wrong or unfair with a ferocity that can get them ejected and fined and suspended. But what the Rangers manager felt watching those three umpires surround Ohtani and conduct a full-body search was something beyond a standard disagreement about a call. What he felt, what came pouring out of him in those moments, was fury at what he described as inexplicable actions. His word. Inexplicable. He didn't use that word carelessly. He used it because from his perspective, from where he sat watching the game unfold, what he was witnessing made no sense. The trigger for the inspection, the timing of it, the specific moment it occurred within this specific game, none of it lined up with what he believed the situation warranted. He condemned it. Publicly. Loudly. With the kind of directness that managers reach for when they believe something genuinely wrong is happening in front of them and they are not willing to be polite about it. His specific focus was on the fifth inning. On what Ohtani had done, or more precisely, what Ohtani had allegedly done, that prompted three officials to move in his direction simultaneously. Because in the manager's view, the actions being questioned were not inexplicable at all, they were the normal, routine actions of a baseball player going about his business in the middle of a plate appearance. The confrontation that followed between the Rangers manager and the umpiring crew was intense. Words were exchanged. Ground was not given on either side. And the fury that had erupted in those first moments did not cool quickly. It lingered through the rest of the inning, through the conversation that spilled beyond the field, and into the post-game discussion that would consume the baseball world for days. But the Rangers manager was not the only person on that field who had something to say. Max Muncy has never been a player who stays quiet when he believes something wrong is happening. His voice has always been one of the louder ones in any dugout. His willingness to challenge calls, to push back, to make absolutely certain that the people making decisions on a baseball field understand when he believes those decisions are incorrect, that is simply who he is. It is part of his identity as a competitor. What Muncy witnessed in the fifth inning pushed him past whatever threshold he normally operates within. He yelled at the umpire. Not in the careful, calculated way that experienced players sometimes challenge officials while staying just within the boundary of acceptability. He yelled. Fully. With everything that had built up inside him from watching the events of that inning unfold. Because layered on top of everything else, on top of the body search, on top of the Rangers manager's eruption, on top of the tension that had been rising like pressure in a sealed container, the home plate umpire made a wrong call. In baseball, wrong calls happen. Every player, every manager, every fan understands this at some level. Human beings making split-second decisions in real time will occasionally get it wrong. That is the nature of the game as it has existed for over a century. But timing matters enormously when it comes to wrong calls. A wrong call in a low-stakes moment in the middle innings of a meaningless game is absorbed and forgotten within minutes. A wrong call in the middle of a fifth inning already crackling with tension, already featuring a body search of the most famous player in baseball, already featuring a manager screaming about inexplicable actions, that kind of wrong call does not get absorbed. That kind of wrong call becomes a spark. And Muncy made sure that everyone in that stadium, everyone watching, and most importantly everyone wearing an umpire's uniform that day, understood exactly how wrong it was. His confrontation with the home plate umpire was raw and unfiltered. He challenged the call directly. He challenged the entire sequence of officiating decisions that had brought the game to this boiling point. He stood his ground in the way that players stand their ground when they believe the integrity of competition has been compromised not once but repeatedly in the same inning. The scene on that field was unlike anything that crowd had come to see that day. 3 umpires and a body search. A furious manager condemning inexplicable actions. Muncy screaming with everything he had. And a wrong call by the home plate umpire sitting at the center of all of it like an undetonated explosive. Now let's step back. Because what happened in that 5th inning means something larger than the chaos of its individual moments. Here is the truth about Shohei Ohtani's situation in professional baseball today. He exists at a level of scrutiny that no other player experiences. Not even close. The combination of his talent, his fame, his cultural significance, his commercial presence, and the sheer extraordinary nature of what he does on a baseball field every single day means that everything he does, every swing, every pitch, every warm-up throw, every interaction, every piece of equipment he wears, is watched more carefully than any other player in the sport. That scrutiny comes from fans. It comes from media. It comes from opponents. And as the 5th inning demonstrated, it comes from officials. When 3 umpires decide to surround you and conduct a body search, they are making a calculation. They are saying that the level of attention on this player, the stakes of this moment, the pressure of this particular game situation requires them to act. Whatever specific trigger prompted the inspection, the underlying context is always the same. This is the most watched player in baseball, and everything involving him carries magnified weight. For Ohtani, navigating that reality requires something that goes beyond athletic ability. It requires the kind of psychological stability that most people never develop because most people never face that level of sustained, intense, unrelenting scrutiny. His response to being surrounded and searched was the same as his response to everything else that comes his way. Calm. Composed. Cooperative. Without drama. Without complaint. Without any of the visible emotional reaction that the moment would have justified and that most human beings in that situation would have displayed naturally. That composure is not indifference. It is not the absence of feeling. It is something much harder to develop and maintain. It is the result of a person who has so clearly defined their own values and their own identity that external events, however dramatic or unfair or unexpected, cannot shake the foundation. The Rangers manager lost his composure. Muncy lost his composure. The entire 5th inning lost its composure. Ohtani removed his jacket, cooperated fully, and went back to being Shohei Ohtani. That contrast tells you everything about why the streak reached 44 in the first place. The conversation that erupted after that game did not stay inside the stadium. It spread immediately. Across television. Across social media. Across every corner of the baseball world where people had opinions about officiating, about fairness, about the treatment of the sport's most prominent player, and about what the wrong call by the home plate umpire meant for the outcome of a game that now felt compromised at multiple levels. The Rangers manager's condemnation of the inexplicable 5th inning actions became a story of its own. Analysts debated whether his fury was justified. Former players weighed in on what the body search protocol should and should not look like. Officials who had worked games for decades were asked to comment on whether what happened represented appropriate procedure or something that had crossed a line. Muncy's confrontation with the home plate umpire generated its own separate conversation about accountability in officiating. About whether wrong calls of that magnitude, in moments of that significance, carry consequences beyond the immediate game. About what the sport owes its players and its fans in terms of getting it right when the stakes are highest. And at the center of all of it, calm, focused, already preparing for the next plate appearance, the next game, the next opportunity to add to a streak that had already made history, was Shohei Ohtani. Not giving interviews about the body search. Not fueling the controversy. Not positioning himself as a victim of unfair treatment or a hero of unjust circumstances. Just preparing. Just working. Just being, with complete and unshakable consistency, exactly who he has always been. 3 umpires surrounded the greatest player in baseball at the height of his most extraordinary individual achievement. They asked him to remove his jacket. They conducted a full-body search in front of a stadium full of witnesses. A manager erupted in fury, calling the actions inexplicable. Muncy screamed at the home plate umpire over a wrong call that poured fuel onto an already burning situation. The fifth inning of what should have been another chapter in a legendary streak became instead a defining moment of controversy, conflict and chaos. And through all of it, through every second of the drama that swirled around him, Shohei Ohtani stood at the center with the same composure he always carries. The same quiet, unshakable sense of purpose that has brought him to 44 consecutive plate appearances reaching base. The same character that makes legends cry in dugouts and makes opponents furious and makes officials pay closer attention than they pay to anyone else in the sport. The body search found nothing. Because there was nothing to find. There never is, with Ohtani. What they were really searching for, what everyone who watches him is really searching for, is the secret. The explanation. The thing that makes him different. But some things cannot be found by searching from the outside. They have to be built, quietly and consistently, from within. And Shohei Ohtani has been building his for a very long time.